Hi, I'm Greg Nadeau, publisher of InfraTalk America. In this very special episode, I'm joined by Shailen Bhatt, administrator of the Federal Highway Administration. With an accomplished career in transportation, including serving as CEO of 2 state DOTs and the private sector, he now oversees the $350 billion federal aid highway program administered in partnership with the states. This program makes our nation's transportation network safer, more efficient, equitable, and climate resilient. The administrator speaks to safety, innovation and technology in project delivery, and more. This is the InfraTalk America podcast. Federal Highway Administrator Shailen Bhatt, welcome to InfraTalk America, and thanks so much for taking the time to join us for this conversation.
Well, thank you, Administrator Nadeau.
And of course, a little bit of that history is probably worth noting in that the administrator and I worked together in the Obama administration when we both arrived at Federal Highway for our respective assignments in 2009, and then worked for several years together under the leadership of former Federal Highway Administrator Victor Mendez and, of course, ultimately U.S. DOT Deputy Secretary Victor Mendez. So we both had the pleasure of serving an administrator who I always characterized as constructively impatient, which really was the catalyst to that team advancing the Everyday Counts initiative, which was all about accelerating the deployment of innovation. So the administrator and I served in that era and both contributed to the development of that program over the years. And he now finds himself in the position to administer that program in the years to come. So welcome, Administrator Bhatt, and we're looking very much forward to talking about innovation and other topics.
Yeah.
Can you sort of give us a sense of where you are, your what I call your story path to your current position included service leading an MPO, a deputy of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, CEO of 2 state DOTs, Delaware and Colorado. And following several years leading ITS America. So obviously an extensive background in advancing technology in the marketplace and technology policy. So what I've taken from that storied career of yours leading to the current position as Federal Highway Administrator is you may be the most well-rounded Federal Highway Administrator in its history. And can you sort of talk a little bit about just what that experience has prepared, how it's prepared you to serve in this capacity in the obviously in the Biden and Buttigieg administration, and some of the priorities that you're charged with advancing, and certainly in the context of digital project delivery and how innovation is changing the way we do business, and sort of put that all together and help us understand where that prepares you to take these opportunities in the future of the Federal Aid Highway Program.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I was the most well-rounded, but I'm becoming more well-rounded with all the travel and food that I eat, so that's an ongoing physiological process. I think part of the reason that Victor and I saw, really eye to eye, and you were part of that as well, was just on this idea that, it takes us so long to deliver these projects, right? And time is money. The longer we go, the more expensive the projects become. And I was also struck by how technology has been transforming every facet of our life, right? So the way we consume music, the way that we, use our phones or, BlackBerries back when we were in the Obama administration, the way we travel with, ride sharing and Airbnb. And, this has been this ongoing transition. And I was just thinking that, in transportation, we haven't seen as much of a impact of technology on the way we deliver projects. And so, when I was in Delaware, Michigan at the time was a leader in using tablets, right? So getting away from like writing everything down on paper, and that was considered digital innovation. I was like, we're going to do that. So I actually sent a bunch of our folks up to Michigan, and they were figuring out how do we, take stuff down on tablets instead of writing everything down on paper. I went to Colorado, and we had a $1.2 billion project that was the largest, highway project in the history of the state. And I remember when they were showing me some of the technical concepts before we selected the final proposal, and a lot of them were incorporating digital design elements, right? So modeling groundwater, infiltration, and just some of the structures and sort of like the beginnings of what today we would consider to be parametric design. And I was struck by the way that they were doing it, and it was impacting their cost to both show us, and impacting their cost, meaning making it cheaper to show all of these scenarios, all of these impacts, but then also how that would translate into the construction of it. And then when that asset eventually gets turned over to the Colorado DOT, how having the digital as-built would be, critical, for maintaining that asset. And I was like, so I've just always been a big fan. Then I spent time at AECOM, who were leaders in, digital delivery. And I think a lot of the market is heading that way, HDR and all the different companies that are out there. And so, when I became the administrator, there was funding available in BIL. And so I was like, you know what, if we've got funding that's available to deliver the largest transportation program that we've ever had, and my focus is on project delivery every single day, then we need to be giving people the tools to do it in a digital fashion.
So there was an initiative, actually one of our alliance partners, Trimble led, back in the result was in the 2020 Appropriations Act, there was language sort of directing Federal Highway to take on this type of program by directing utilization of existing funds within the TDIP account of Federal Highway. So it gets into a little bit of the weeds. But that was kind of the first evidence of a program. And coming out of Congress, if they could understand the benefits. And then the real breakthrough was that led to the similar program language being included in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. What that does, as you pointed out, it really sort of institutionalizes an effort on an ongoing basis. The level of funding is going to be challenging, to say the least. We just, the NOFO that you issued had really been kicking around for a couple of years. So the fact that you acted on it as quickly as you did, and certainly in the context of a lot of demand for putting together, discretionary programs coming out of EJA, historic demand on Federal Highway. So getting that program out has really catalyzed a lot of thinking and creativity. I've been aware of some of the topics, some of the scopes of several of the efforts that state DOTs are leading, and they're very creative. So I think you're going to enjoy, evaluating some really good ideas. So your decision to put this out there is and incent some real creativity, as opposed to just distributing money on sort of on the kind of basis you described, was I think something that the industry certainly would agree with. If anything, I think the demand for the program that you launched is indicating certainly a long-term need for a bigger investment in helping to advance these programs at the state level. So an important catalyst, and on behalf of the private sector, industry, the software sector, the consulting engineers, the contractors who are very much anxious to make this happen. Thank you for your quick action on this. It's something that was noted and certainly speaks to your understanding of the role that technology plays and your personal commitment to it. So going forward, any further sort of prognostications on how we can continue this momentum?
Well, Victor created Everyday Counts. You led it. I would say that I came up with the name because I remember Victor sitting around saying, it just takes too long. And I was like, yeah, every day counts and people will get that. And then you ended up leading that. And so for me, my big mantra since I've become the administrator is that we need to be driven, right? And driven is also an acronym, and it might not work its way into law and people will be talking about it 10 years later, but whether it's the 43,000 deaths on our roadways, like we all just need to be very driven every single day in everything we do. But driven being an acronym, the D is for delivery, because at the end of the day, we can have all the money in the world if we're not turning that money into just important projects for the American people, then we're not doing our jobs. But it's interesting on the 34 million. We have back the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was $50 billion, and we thought that was a lot of money back in 2010. And the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, $1.2 trillion. Federal Highways has about $350 billion of that, more money from the CHIPS Act. And so we're talking about a lot of money. We have a lot of NOFOs out there. But that was part of my impetus for getting it out as quickly as I did and creating the NOFO, because initially there was some discussion of let's just take the $34 million and distribute it amongst the states. And in my opinion, $700,000, going to each state, maybe it's a couple of licenses, you're not going to get the impact. And so what I asked them to do was, if we're thinking about the future, because those of us who lead organizations, whether it's a state DOT, whether you're leading the private sector, you have the responsibility of leading the organization you have today, but also setting up and transforming the organization you have today for the future that's coming at you. And so what I wanted to do with this was to take the $34 million and put out this NOFO. And, we've actually got I think 35 states that have applied. They've asked for, well over $100 million in funding when we only have 34 million available. But that, I think, demonstrates both the desire to deliver projects in a more innovative fashion, but also the critical need. We just can't build projects in the 21st century like we did in the 20th century. It's a different world that's out there. So I am really looking forward to. I think we're hoping to announce these, later this year at the AASHTO annual meeting, and there are a few states that are already leading in this space. But I think the other part of the genesis for this idea was, as state DOTs, we're always trying to replicate success or rip off great ideas that other states have come up with. So what I'm hoping is we put this money in the hands of a few states who will go out and do great things with it, and then other states will be like, "What a great idea! Let's go do that."
Including a number of efforts at AASHTO to address the open standards question, a common language that everybody can design to essentially accelerate that process of interoperability, whether it's e-ticketing or BIM for infrastructure. So Federal Highway is really at the intersection of leading a lot of that and producing a lot of the content that is helping states really understand how to get there. But ED6 was a real catalyst to meteoric expansion of e-ticketing in more than I think 30 states at this point, which is really going to transform. We call it the next generation of e-construction. E-ticketing is the gateway. Matter of fact, we entitled an info doc that we produced exactly that: e-ticketing, the gateway to next generation e-construction. And we're already beginning to see some very innovative approaches in addressing the policy objective of your administration on environmental product declarations and technologies that can help states accomplish that with greater ease. So there's a lot going on in a wide range of technology, and I'll give you a chance to sort of comment on any of that you choose, and then I want to sort of connect the technology topic to the safety challenge that you just touched on.
Yeah, so I think you started talking about policy, right? And I think we're always going to have ad nauseum policy debates about what should we build and what are the right projects, and there's always going to be a right left swing on what we identify through politics and policy as to what should get built. But in terms of how it gets built, I think there is bipartisan support, and the American people expect that we're going to deliver these projects on time and on budget, right? And just thinking about the scale, of the bridge program, right? So like we were hoping in the Obama administration to maybe get Brent Spence done, right? Well, now you've got President Biden, Leader McConnell shaking hands on the bridge. That bridge is moving forward, but not only is that bridge moving forward, but Golden Gate is moving forward. I-5 is being discussed. Cape Cod bridges. I mean, bridges all over the country. Well, we can't just take the existing tools and talent that we have and say we're just going to deliver the biggest bridge program in our history, and even like dialing in on a bridge, right? So traditionally, when you design a bridge, you're going to have like roadway engineers doing the approaches and the roadway surfaces. You're going to have bridge engineers, particularly some of these big cathedral projects, looking at different materials. You're going to have traffic and ITS engineers who are looking at their element of it. And from a digital design perspective, this gets everybody into one model. Everybody's understanding what the opportunities and challenges are. You're talking about e-ticketing from a construction perspective. It makes more sense. That everybody is looking at one digital document. And then, as I said earlier, the digital as-built show up. So you've got this asset to maintain over its lifespan, and that makes that easier. But even on the NEPA side, right? Like you can do digital NEPA now, right? We can get way better engagement if we're talking to people, through their devices instead of like, hey, let's go do a charrette at a community center between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. And so, from my perspective, this isn't a nice to have thing. The rest of the world has deployed innovation at scale. And, if we as the United States of America are going to deliver projects on time and on budget, then we need to be leaders in this space. And that's what we're trying to do, both with ADC, CMS, and then all of the different innovation tools that we're deploying.
And I talked about, you had mentioned safety, which you always do, given it's every federal highway administrator's number one priority for good reason. And obviously the concern of late, really since, post-COVID and the growth in fatalities and serious injuries, and it's a big concern of every state DOT in the country. But we've adopted work zone safety as kind of a policy issue that we've done some work on over the last couple of years. And again, the technology relationship, there's a program that Federal Highway has developed. I think it was launched in 2021, the Work Zone Exchange Program, which has essentially become the data set, the interoperability exchange, where you essentially it's an open standards initiative in that it creates a common language where a number of technologies can feed data into it in real time in work zones, and that data can be distributed through a number of tools in vehicles and in roadside technology. So that ability to, that interoperability between technologies provides real-time instant access to work zone information as they adapt and move and have an impact on the roadway. So it's an example of how the broader digitization of the process makes possible this kind of real-time exchange of data and can lead to obviously a much safer work zone for not only workers in that work zone, but the traveling public. Federal Highway has done some really terrific work, National Work Zone Safety Strategy, and other efforts to, I think I need to give a shout out to American Road Transportation Builders Association, ARCTA. They've done some very good work in advocating for, more hardening of work zone, hardening barriers, and other safety strategies as well. So it's the private sector, the contractor community, obviously protecting their workers in work zone is their number one priority. So a lot of great work going on in this space, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I know Delaware DOT, your old shop, is one of the leaders in an initiative that's specifically working toward that end. And I think you'll see more about that in the future. So safety is a great opportunity for technology.
Yeah, look, I think I've always been an evangelist for safety. And when I talk about technology, I think about technology for outcomes, right? So, digital construction is about delivering the project, on time and on budget, not about technology for the sake of technology. And on the safety side, I think, when we were at DOT, we were cautiously optimistic because we were at 30,000 deaths in 2010. And we were like, oh, maybe we're on our way towards zero. And we've actually gone the other way. And I am actually sick to death of talking about safety as our number one priority. I am all about, what are we actually doing? Secretary Buttigieg has the National Roadway Safety Strategy as federal highways as part of that. I am a big proponent. I'm out there challenging everyone. If you have an idea, because we have, this, we have our proven safety countermeasures. I would say when in doubt, roundabout, roadway departures, separated bike lanes, high friction surface treatments. There's a bunch of stuff that are proven safety countermeasures that we can do more of. But I am just a firm believer we're never going to get to zero unless we deploy technology at scale. We talk about work zones. We had a horrific crash in Baltimore, 6 workers killed when a vehicle entered at high speed into the work zone. There's speed safety cameras that can be deployed. There's data that can be pulled in. There's just all sorts of stuff. Connected V2X technologies that can be deployed. So when I talk about being driven, I long for a day, and I think it'll happen in my lifetime, where fatalities, whether it's on the American transportation system or in our work zones, are a quaint memory. And we have conversations that say, don't you remember when, people actually used to die on American roadways, because we've deployed, all of the infrastructure and all the technology to make those things a thing of the past. Just like we've conquered fatalities in a lot of different areas, we just need to apply technology and science to these challenges as well.
You think there's a speed epidemic in this country, and that seems to have evolved since really post-COVID?
I think there's a speeding epidemic in this country. And you can just see, we have the data. Speed is also a problem, right? Because we have, we sort of have three Americas when it comes to transportation, right? Rural areas where, you run off the road and you might not get to a doctor for a couple of hours, or you might not get help. And that's a significant problem. We've got an urban challenge where we've got, people walking and biking and people driving at high rates of speed in those areas. And then we've got this arterial America where we're seeing huge upticks in people wanting to do things like active transportation. And they're on these arterials where people are going 50, 60, 70 miles an hour on non-limited access highways. And so, we put out speed safety camera guidance this year. I'm a huge proponent. There should be a speed safety camera in every school zone in America. I mean, I know they're politically fraught, and everybody says, well, what about enforcement, or what about, to me, that there's no reason anybody should be exceeding the speed limit in a school zone. And if you look at the data around work zones where speed safety cameras are deployed, it is unequivocal that speed comes down. So we have a speeding problem. We have a speed problem. It's part of the NRSSS to make sure that we have, a safe speed approach. And I'm committed to making that happen. But I would also say we have a vulnerable road user problem, because the vast majority of our fatalities and the massive increase in growth is amongst vulnerable road users. So we need to partner with everyone to make sure that we're identifying those areas. And we've got a plan and a deployment coming for that. And we've got an epidemic of distracted driving. Driving is now the distraction from what people want to be doing on their devices. So that's why I think technology partly created this problem. Technology is going to be a big part of the solution.
Well, and given your background, your stint in the private sector with ITS America, what role is sort of the onboard technology? Is the onboard technology the balance of becoming a distraction versus enhancing the vehicle's role in protecting people on the highways? Where do you see that technology evolving, and at what point does the entire fleet come armed with that kind of safety technology?
Yeah, there's like 300 million vehicles in the fleet, and obviously the vehicle side of this belongs to NHTSA. Federal highways were more on the infrastructure side, but a lot of states have been leading in deploying roadside technology and detectors, and luckily the FCC allowed the CV to X to move into the safety band, so we have a lot of CV to X that is deployed out there. I mean, at the end of the day, cars have become driving computers, right? Like they're essentially just driving computers. And again, if you look at the technology side of it, right, like ADAS, automated driving assistance system, so automatic emergency braking is unequivocally reducing crashes now, where distracted drivers are, creating a problem. Automated lane keeping, right, where the vehicle is keeping in the lane. That's going to help with some of these roadway departure activities. Connected vehicle technologies. We still have vehicles crashing in whiteout conditions, whether it's a snowstorm or a sandstorm in the desert. And to me, in the 21st century, this idea that you'll be running down the road and there's a vehicle stopped just ahead of you and your vehicle isn't detecting it just seems like a very 20th century approach to things. So I think there's 300 million vehicles in the fleet. It takes about 15 to 20 years for that to turn over. So you're going to see more and more technology being deployed. And that's why I think that the states and cities that are leading in this space now, we want to provide them the solutions so that we can just get to zero even quicker.
It is by far your most important challenge, and the leadership that you and Federal Highway are providing is extremely important at this juncture. So best of luck there. And I know without exception, every state DOT in the country is employing every countermeasure that they can possibly do. So it's an ongoing battle. There's no question about it. And sometimes when I'm on the highway, I tend to use the technology that's now available and tend to set my speed at where it's certainly within limits. And I'm sometimes feel like I'm standing still as I get passed regularly by vehicles that have to be going 80 to 85 miles an hour. So there's just no question. And the reality is, in very few years, the ability to enforce speed with technology is clearly available. It's practically off-the-shelf technology ready today. I'm just not sure the politics of America would enable that kind of rigorous enforcement to occur. One quick example, I remember back when I was at Maine DOT back in the 2000s, we had a grant to do a study of red light running. And we did this study and it was rampant. I mean, rampant. But an effort to put legislation in that would enable us to expand red light running technology, and obviously highly vulnerable intersections, never got out of committee. The sense that people have to have a reasonable right to get away with speeding essentially prevailed in that particular era, which is kind of a real issue. But so do you think the day is coming that technology is going to more sort of directly govern the speed that vehicles can travel?
Yeah, I think politics in America can be challenging. And, I've worked in a blue state, I've worked in a red state, I've worked in a purple state. And I always feel like it's important that, we give respect to people who don't agree with our point of view. And so I can completely understand if somebody says something like, I just feel like it's a violation if you're putting up more traffic enforcement. But we need to have that conversation. I can remember in Colorado, a certain member of the legislature telling me we were arguing for snow tire laws because we knew like the vast majority of our crashes and breakdowns on I-70 were caused by snowstorms. And we're just saying, hey, let's mandate snow tires. And this person telling me, no, we're not going to do that because there's no mention of snow tires in the Constitution. And that's where we start to lose we get a little bit detached from reality when and this is on the right and the left, right? If you're going to make sort of extreme statements of like, hey, you can't have a snow tire because it's not in the Constitution, I think there's like a lot of common sense, a lot of common ground, and so we've got a few years, to like have these conversations, but I think we need to like say, here's the data. I think you're always on safe ground making data-driven decisions. So the data is pretty clear that, technology, whether it's red light cameras or, speed safety cameras or, whatever these speed monitoring things might be, they unequivocally can help reduce these crashes. So let's try it out. Let's give it a shot. The department has a smart intersection challenge that's out there right now. Like, so just this is more on detecting vulnerable road users and flagging it and like holding like a walk signal or a red light if a bicyclist or a walker is approaching. And so, I just have, I think Winston Churchill said something like, Americans will inevitably do the right thing once they've tried everything else. And so I am hopeful that we'll go through all the other things. But again, let's keep our eye on the prize, which is right now, 43,000 Americans are dying every year on American roadways. And there's no other industry that has a safety track record like that. If there was, we would regulate it out the wazoo. And so let's just take a common sense approach and say, what can we do to get us to zero? And let's go try that out.
A good note to close on the most important issue that I've heard you speak at a number of venues very passionately about this, and thank goodness for that, and your colleagues in the states across America. So a continued area of focus and a constant area of focus, which it deserves to be. So
I'm naturally an optimistic person, and like I said, there are sort of big, seemingly intractable problems that we have in this country. But the law that I'm implementing now is called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and in that law, there's climate legislation, there's safety legislation, there's legislation that speeds up environmental permitting. And so what you see is Republicans and Democrats were able to come together and say, hey, we can agree. And I don't love everything that's in there, but I'm getting some stuff that I think is important to me. And because of that bipartisan infrastructure law, we got a $1.2 trillion funding bill that is going to reshape infrastructure in America. And so, we do seem to have a lot of challenges sometimes speaking to one another and finding common ground. But, I'm just a big believer that we not only we have to find this common ground as a country to find success in the 21st century. And I'm really hopeful that the delivery of the projects that are in the bipartisan infrastructure law are going to convince the American people that this is a wise place for America to invest our funds, that these infrastructure projects are important and that they contribute to a better country, a more economically sound country, and that this can be a blueprint that our transportation system, which truly binds us together, can hopefully be the roadmap as to how we come together once again as a nation.
Well said. And, our sort of overall topic of how do we advance innovation in the Federal Aid Highway Program and the challenges associated with simply the way it's structured. I like to say to advance innovation, you got to go door to door to 52 different DOTs who proceed with advancing how to adopt said innovation 52 different ways. So it's a broad challenge, but those decisions are being made at the right level because they deliver the projects, but they need to be open to the new and advanced ways, whether it's new age materials or new age processes or digital approaches to it. It's sort of the infrastructure would address those real high level challenges you just articulated. The partnership that you share with AASHTO in the States, and it is our absolute best hope to advance and accelerate the use of proven, tested, but underutilized technologies.
Yeah, I'm laser focused on project delivery. I think we've got to deliver projects for the American people, and I am just convinced that whether it's new materials or digital construction, we just have to build projects in the 21st century using 21st century tools, and this is a sort of our first step on a long journey, but ultimately it'll be successful.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. We have arrived at our appointed hour, and you don't often have a chance to spend this much time in a conversation like this. So it's very much appreciated.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the InfraTalk Podcast. We hope this discussion inspires you to ask your own questions and encourages you to have discussions with policymakers and your peers. If you want to know more about InfraTalk America, visit us at infratalkamerica.com, follow us on social media at InfraTalk USA, or subscribe to the InfraTalk Podcast on your favorite listening platform to be notified of all new episodes and features. And remember, every innovation starts with a conversation, so let's start talking.